Before you scroll away, pause for a moment. What you are about to hear is not ordinary. It is not random. And it is not something that will come twice. The person who once held your hand, who once knew the rhythm of your silence, is standing at a turning point they never believed they would face. Pride has faded. Ego has fallen quiet. Every excuse that once felt reasonable now feels empty. And with folded hands, in the quietest corner of their heart, they are asking for one single chance to speak. Not because everything is perfect. Not because the past can be erased. But because something happened that changed everything. They did not expect it. It was not dramatic. There was no storm, no argument, no grand scene. Just one small, ordinary moment that forced them to look at their life honestly. A moment so simple, yet so powerful, that it shook everything they thought they understood. They realized they were losing something irreplaceable. They replayed every memory. Every laugh. Every disagreement. Every time you waited longer than you should have. Every time you chose patience when they chose distance. And suddenly, the one thing they thought would always remain was slipping quietly out of reach. Don't skip. Every second carries another piece of what they never had the courage to say before. While the world sees them as calm, composed, unchanged, inside they are restless. Their heart keeps repeating one question: what if it's already too late? That thought refuses to leave. It follows them through busy days and silent nights. It whispers during distractions. It echoes in moments meant to feel peaceful. Something unexpected happened. They found themselves alone one evening, not searching for answers, not looking for memories. Yet somehow, your name surfaced. Not gently. Not casually. It came with weight. With meaning. With clarity they could no longer ignore. They realized that every time they imagined their future, you were there. Even when they tried to picture a life without you, something felt incomplete. Forced. Unnatural. They once believed silence would protect both of you. They thought waiting would make things easier. They convinced themselves that if something was meant to be, it would return on its own. But time did not fix what silence created. It only built distance around words that were never spoken. Now that distance feels heavier than ever. Every place reminds them of you. Songs carry memories they cannot escape. Even ordinary routines feel unfamiliar without your presence woven into them. They tried to ignore it. They tried to move forward without looking back. But every path somehow curved toward you. Stay with this story. Because what changed next surprised even them. Someone asked them a simple question. If you could speak honestly to one person without fear, who would it be? They answered your name without thinking. There was no hesitation. No second option. No confusion. Your name came from somewhere deeper than logic. And in that instant, they understood something undeniable. The connection they kept trying to outrun was the very thing giving their life meaning. They stopped pretending after that. They stopped telling themselves there would always be another chance. They stopped believing tomorrow was guaranteed. Instead, they began preparing for one conversation that now feels more important than anything else. But fear still lingers. They wonder if your heart has closed its doors. They wonder if someone else now stands where they once did. They wonder if their silence spoke louder than any apology ever could. Yet despite the fear, something inside them has grown stronger than doubt. They discovered something while looking through old messages and forgotten photos. Not something expensive. Not something extraordinary. Just a small reminder of a moment when you both laughed over something meaningless. And in that tiny memory, they saw what they had overlooked. You made difficult days lighter. You listened when they didn't deserve patience. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. That realization refuses to fade. Now they stand at the edge of a decision. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just deeply personal. They know they cannot return to pretending nothing changed. Because everything inside them has changed. They no longer want another day filled with unfinished thoughts. They want one honest conversation. One moment where nothing is hidden. One chance to say what should have been said long ago. But just as they gather courage, another truth reveals itself. They misunderstood more than they realized. Every delayed reply from you. Every moment you seemed distant. Every silence they interpreted as indifference now looks different through new understanding. They see their own hesitation reflected back. They see how two hearts waited for the other to speak first. And suddenly, the story feels less like loss and more like missed timing. Don't skip. Because this is where everything begins to shift. They are no longer reaching out to demand answers. They are reaching out to offer truth. No expectations. No rehearsed speeches. Just sincerity. They have already accepted something important. Losing pride is easier than losing you forever. Then something else happens. They remember a sentence you once said. Something ordinary at the time. You said, "Sometimes silence says what we're too afraid to admit." They didn't understand it then. Now they do. Silence was never safety. It was avoidance. And avoidance almost cost them everything. They realize that if they remain quiet now, the silence will become permanent. So they make a promise to themselves. When they speak, it will not be from guilt. It will not be from loneliness. It will be from truth. Truth that has taken too long to surface. As they prepare to finally reach out, something unexpected happens again. A small sign. A coincidence. Your name appears somewhere random. A memory resurfaces at the exact moment they were doubting themselves. And instead of fear, they feel calm. Not the calm of certainty about the outcome. But the calm of knowing they are finally doing the right thing. The first words they practiced disappear. Perfection no longer matters. What matters is honesty. They realize something astonishing. They were searching for peace in distractions, in distance, in independence. But peace was never out there somewhere. It was in the connection they were too afraid to protect. You. They no longer fear rejection the way they fear regret. Regret lasts longer. It echoes louder. It lingers in ways rejection never could. So they step forward. Not to rewrite history. Not to erase mistakes. But to build something new on truth instead of silence. When the moment finally arrives, there are no dramatic speeches. Just a steady voice carrying words that have waited far too long. I should have spoken sooner. That is how it begins. Not with blame. Not with excuses. But with accountability. They admit they were afraid. Afraid of vulnerability. Afraid of needing someone so deeply. Afraid of losing control over emotions they couldn't fully understand. They admit that the happiest moments of their recent past share one common thread. You were there. They admit they mistook comfort for something ordinary. They assumed loyalty would remain without effort. They believed love did not require courage. They were wrong. Every misunderstanding suddenly feels smaller than the honesty now filling the space between you. They explain that nothing dramatic changed their heart overnight. It was a series of quiet realizations. A collection of small truths they could no longer deny. The understanding that life feels incomplete when the person who truly understands you is no longer beside you. They do not ask for forgiveness immediately. They do not demand another chance. They simply say, "You deserved honesty. And I am here to give it." The weight they carried begins to lift with each word spoken. For the first time, there is no pretending. No hiding behind sarcasm or indifference. Just sincerity. They tell you they stopped believing in perfect timing. They started believing in brave timing. They tell you they do not expect everything to return to how it was. But they hope it can grow into something stronger, built on lessons learned the hard way. Silence no longer controls the story. Hope does. And as the conversation continues, something shifts. Not dramatically. Not magically. But genuinely. The distance that once felt impossible begins to shrink under the weight of shared truth. They realize something final, something powerful. Love is not proven in grand gestures. It is proven in moments like this. When pride steps aside. When vulnerability wins. When someone chooses honesty even at the risk of hearing, "No," they came with folded hands not to beg for sympathy, but to protect the possibility of a future that still feels meaningful. And finally, they say the sentence that has lived in their heart for far too long. I don't want another day to pass without you knowing how much you matter to me. There are no fireworks. No dramatic music. Just a quiet understanding that something important has just happened. The silence that once separated two hearts has been replaced with truth. And whatever happens next will not be built on assumptions. It will be built on courage. Because sometimes, the biggest turning point in any story is not a grand event. It is one honest conversation that almost never happened. Before you let your attention drift somewhere else, stay here for a while. This is not noise. This is not coincidence. And this is not something that arrives twice in the same way. There is a heart somewhere thinking of you right now with a depth that even it did not fully understand until recently. A heart that once chose silence over vulnerability. A heart that now realizes silence was the loudest mistake it ever made. The person you once shared unfiltered laughter with is standing at a crossroads they never prepared for. Pride has loosened its grip. Ego no longer feels important. The need to appear unaffected has completely disappeared. What remains is something raw, something honest, something they can no longer hide from themselves. They are not asking for perfection. They are not asking to rewrite history. They are asking for one conversation. Just one. A space where truth can finally breathe without interruption. Something shifted inside them. It was not dramatic. There were no raised voices. No life-altering announcement. Just an ordinary day that suddenly felt heavier than usual. They were surrounded by people, by responsibilities, by distractions. Yet in the middle of everything, a strange emptiness surfaced. An absence that had a name. Yours. They tried to ignore it. They told themselves it was nostalgia. Habit. Comfort mistaken for connection. But the feeling did not fade. It grew. Quietly. Persistently. Don't scroll away. This part matters more than you think. One evening, without planning to, they found themselves revisiting old memories. Not intentionally searching for pain. Not intentionally chasing the past. But somehow, your voice echoed through those moments. Your patience. Your steady presence. The way you listened even when they struggled to explain themselves. They began to notice a pattern. The happiest memories were never about grand achievements or loud celebrations. They were about simple moments. Conversations that lasted longer than expected. Shared silence that felt safe instead of awkward. The comfort of knowing someone truly understood them without constant explanation. They realized something that unsettled them deeply. They had mistaken consistency for permanence. They assumed you would always be there because you always had been. They believed loyalty required no maintenance. They convinced themselves that if something was real, it did not need to be protected actively. That assumption built the very distance they now feel so strongly. Time passed. Messages became shorter. Calls became less frequent. Not because love disappeared, but because fear disguised itself as independence. They feared needing someone too much. They feared vulnerability more than loneliness. And now loneliness feels louder. Every familiar place carries a shadow of your absence. The cafe where you once shared coffee tastes different. The road you once walked together feels longer. Even music seems incomplete, as if something essential is missing from every melody. They have reached a realization that cannot be undone. Silence does not heal misunderstandings. It deepens them. They thought waiting would make things clearer. Instead, waiting created confusion. They thought distance would strengthen independence. Instead, it highlighted dependence they were too afraid to admit. Someone asked them recently, "What do you regret the most this year?" They expected to think of career choices, missed opportunities, personal mistakes. But your name surfaced again, uninvited yet undeniable. They regret not speaking when it mattered. They regret assuming you understood feelings they never expressed. They regret letting ego sit where honesty should have stood. Stay with this story. The next part reveals what changed everything. There was a moment, small, almost forgettable, that shifted their entire perspective. They were watching people around them celebrate something joyful. Friends surrounded by partners. Laughter filling the air. And instead of feeling happiness, they felt a sharp awareness of who was missing beside them. They imagined turning to share a comment with you. Imagined your reaction. Imagined your quiet smile. And when they turned in reality, you were not there. That absence felt heavier than expected. It was in that instant they understood something profound. You were not just a chapter in their life. You were the steady presence that made other chapters meaningful. The realization did not bring immediate action. It brought reflection. Deep, uncomfortable reflection. They began questioning their choices. Why did they hold back affection? Why did they pretend indifference when they felt attachment? Why did they believe expressing love made them weaker? They saw their own fear clearly for the first time. They were afraid of losing you. And in trying to protect themselves from that possibility, they created it. Don't skip. The heart of this story is unfolding. They have replayed countless scenarios in their mind. What if they reach out and you do not respond? What if your heart has moved on? What if someone else now occupies the space they left unattended? These questions haunt them. Yet another thought haunts them more intensely. What if they never try? Regret feels heavier than rejection. They have come to understand that love is not proven by how long you wait silently. It is proven by how bravely you speak when it is difficult. Another memory resurfaced recently. You once said, almost casually, "I just want honesty." Even if it's uncomfortable. They did not fully grasp the weight of those words at the time. Now those words echo like a guiding light. They realize you were never asking for perfection. You were asking for transparency. For effort. For reassurance that what you felt was not one-sided. And instead of offering that reassurance, they offered silence. Silence that now feels like the greatest betrayal of all. Yet something remarkable has happened. Instead of drowning in guilt, they have chosen courage. They no longer want to approach you with dramatic apologies or exaggerated promises. They want to approach you with simplicity. With truth stripped of decoration. They have accepted that they cannot control your response. They cannot demand forgiveness. They cannot rewind time. But they can speak. They can finally tell you what changed. They can tell you that every attempt to distract themselves led back to thoughts of you. That every future plan felt incomplete without imagining your presence somewhere in it. That every person they met was unconsciously compared to the connection they once shared with you. And none of those comparisons ever felt equal. Stay until the end. Because what they are ready to say now has lived inside them for far too long. They are not coming to you out of loneliness. They have learned to sit alone. They are not coming because other options failed. They are coming because clarity arrived. Clarity that you matter in a way that is rare. Clarity that the bond you shared was not ordinary. Clarity that silence should never again be chosen over sincerity. They want one conversation. Not to pressure you. Not to demand answers. But to place honesty where assumptions once stood. They want to tell you that the distance taught them more than comfort ever did. It showed them how deeply your absence could affect their emotional landscape. It revealed how much of their peace was connected to your presence. They understand now that love is not about grand gestures. It is about consistent effort. About speaking even when the voice shakes. About choosing someone not once, but repeatedly. They are ready to choose you openly. And as they prepare to reach out, a final realization settles within them. If this conversation leads to a new beginning, they will cherish it with awareness they once lacked. If it leads to closure, they will accept it with gratitude for what was shared. But they will no longer allow silence to decide the ending. Because the greatest mistake was never feeling deeply. It was pretending they didn't. And now, with folded hands and an open heart, they are ready to say the words that matter more than any carefully constructed speech. I was afraid of how much you meant to me. There is vulnerability in that admission. There is humility. There is truth. They want you to know that your place in their life was never accidental. It was never temporary in their heart. It was something they struggled to protect because they did not yet understand how to hold something so valuable without fear. Now they understand. They understand that connection requires courage. They understand that timing is fragile. They understand that love unspoken can quietly fade into regret. So they are choosing differently. They are choosing to reach out despite uncertainty. Choosing to express despite vulnerability. Choosing honesty over ego. And when they finally stand before you, whether in person, through a call, or through words sent across distance, they will not begin with promises. They will begin with gratitude. Gratitude that the story is not completely closed. Gratitude that there is still a chance to speak. Gratitude that even after silence, the heart still remembers. And then they will say the one sentence that carries everything they have learned. I don't want another moment of my life to pass without you knowing how deeply you matter to me. What happens next will not be controlled by fate alone. It will be shaped by two hearts willing to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful turning point in any journey is not a dramatic event. It is the decision to finally speak the truth that has been waiting patiently all along. And even after saying those words, their heart does not rush for an answer. It does not demand reassurance. It simply stands there, steady for the first time in a long while, because the truth is no longer trapped inside. They have imagined this moment countless times. In some versions, you walk away. In others, you smile softly. In a few, silence stretches between you like it once did. But in none of those imagined endings do they regret speaking. That is the difference now. They finally understand something powerful. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more than fear. For so long, they believed protecting themselves meant staying guarded. They thought vulnerability would make them weak. But distance taught them the opposite. It showed them that pretending not to care requires far more energy than simply admitting that you do. There were nights when they almost reached out. When your name hovered over their screen. When their fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting the same sentence again and again. Can we talk? It looked so simple. Yet it felt heavier than any complicated paragraph. Each time, doubt interrupted. What if you've moved on? What if you're happier without me? What if reopening this door only brings more confusion? But another voice, quieter yet stronger, kept returning. What if this is the conversation that heals what silence damaged? They began to see that growth is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet realization that you were wrong. That you could have done better. That someone deserved more clarity than you gave them. They do not come to you claiming they have changed overnight. Change is not magic. It is gradual. It is uncomfortable. It is built from reflection and humility. And they have spent long hours reflecting. They see now how often you tried. How you reached out first. How you created space for honest dialogue. How you asked questions not to accuse, but to understand. They see how many times you waited for them to open up, only to be met with half answers and guarded replies. They see it clearly now. And instead of feeling shame alone, they feel gratitude. Because your patience gave them something rare, a mirror. A reflection of what real care looks like. They also know something else. You may have built walls since then. You may have learned to protect your heart in ways you did not before. You may not respond the same way you once would have. And they accept that. Because love is not about controlling outcomes. It is about showing up honestly.